into my time with the company, the family decided to sell the business to a publicly traded firm. And so things changed quite a bit, but I was still producing, and so they left me alone, and so things were still great. I loved what I was doing. And then a year and a half later, we were sold again, and a year after that, we were sold again.
Wow.
All the publicly traded firms. And so, you know, we kind of woke up and we were no longer in Kansas anymore. And so it was really a difficult environment. And so some of the family members, his sons that stayed around to kind of run things, well, they got tired of it, and so they left. And so the company, our headquarters, decided to bring in a new guy to be our leader, the president of our company. And we were like a $160 million company, part of a $1 billion organization. And anyway, so we were kind of the small guys. And this guy came in from GE, and he brought the whole GE methodology with him. And he and I hit it off right away. I liked him, he liked me. And he said, "Hey Jim, I want you to be the VP of sales." And I'm like, "Hey, you know, thanks, but no thanks. I've got a good gig going. I don't want to mess that up." And so anyway, he kept after me for 3 months, and about every day he was chirping in my ear saying, "You know, I need you in this role." And I was like, "You know, thanks, but no thanks." And I finally had this little voice in my head that was saying, "You know, Lang, if you're going to grow in your career, you really need to step out of your comfort zone. You need to take this position." And so I decided to take that position, listen to that voice. And it was about a week later that I had the stark realization that this guy led really and lived out the adage that the beatings will continue until morale improves. I mean, it was the most, truly the most unhealthy work environment you could ever imagine. And it was a pretty common occurrence. My office was right next to his, corner was between us. We shared an assistant. And he would literally every day, sometimes multiple times a day, he'd be this close, yelling and screaming at me with veins bulging out of his neck, cussing at me every word you could think of. And it was absolutely horrendous. And so I was in that role for a little over a year and a half. And the last year, I literally would drive to the office every day, wondering, what in the world are you doing, Lang, getting ready to subject yourself to this abuse again? And I really probably was depressed during that time, was working long hours, was just, he'd call me at home and just, it was horrible. And so anyway, but I kept going because I had, for two reasons. One, I was still making a lot of money. And two, I had 25 salespeople who I felt responsible for in our organization around the country. And if I left, I viewed my primary role as really to protect them from all of the abuse so they could go out and do what they needed to do. And so I knew that if I left, you know, it could be really trouble. And I didn't want to be the guy, you know, when the going gets tough, Lang bails out. Well, by the way, I need to warn you a little bit that, well, I just need to tell you that the fact of the matter is that I'm going to be sharing from a Christian point of view here and what I'm talking about here. And I had somewhat of an encounter with God during that time where I felt like he said, it's time for you to move on, and I'm not going to go into that. But I decided to leave, and that was in 2003. And so in early 2004, I actually pulled the trigger and decided to leave. I gave him like 2 months for me to work out the transition and all of that. And so 2004, I went from making all this money. My net income in 2004 was $0. And so I had to learn a whole lot during that season. And so, but in the midst of all of that, I really began to develop a heart for marketplace ministry and just how God can work in the lives of leaders and how that can be impactful. I know Corey and I talked a lot about that. She said she's starting to see that a lot in some of her research and some of the people that you've been talking to, I think. And so anyway, I did some consulting things here and there, but I had about a 20-month gig that actually paid my bills, but I struggled for 7 years, and it was difficult. And so I had identity stuff going on, like feeling like I wasn't worth a whole lot, and you know, all this sort of stuff. So I was learning tremendously during this time. Well, I was asked to be the chairman of Toledo's National Day of Prayer Breakfast, which was their 19th annual one in 2008. And so I was asked a year in advance. And so one of my primary roles was to find a speaker. And so I found this guy to be a speaker, and just because I really connected with his message about the marketplace and that sort of thing. And his name is Ray Hilbert, and he was from Indianapolis. And so he came in, it was May the 1st, and we had it sold out. It's 1,000 people at the event, and just a great event. And he came in, did a terrific job, and he and I afterwards went to Bob Evans on Airport Highway in Toledo just to get to know one another a little bit more. And he was the chairman of, CEO and founder of an organization called Truth at Work. And so he and I got to talking. Oh, by the way, before I get into this, I want to just back up a second with the whole boss story. So I felt led during that time, and I'm not going to get into the details of it, but I felt led to write a book. And I wasn't a writer, didn't think I wanted to write. I hated to write, didn't think I was going to be good at it. And I ended up writing a book where I took my boss's leadership style in 8 key areas where I felt that he fell down, and I contrasted it with the greatest leaders in the Bible, whether it be Jesus, Moses, Joseph, whoever, it might be in similar circumstances. And that book was Leadership, Biblical First Aid for Leaders is the name of it. And that really kind of launched me on this crazy path that I'm on right now. And so I've written several other books since then, but and I write a monthly magazine for Christian business owners as a way to encourage those that they serve and do some things along those lines. So anyway, so I'm just kind of getting this stuff started, and I'm at breakfast with Ray Hilbert, and we're talking, and it was just, you ever have those times when you're meeting with somebody, you just know that you know that you know there's something going on here, and you're supposed to be doing something with this person, and I had that very strongly, and he told me later that he did as well. And that led me to driving to Indianapolis to sit in on this roundtable group that he was telling me a little bit about with these Christian leaders. And I sat in on this, and I was just blown away by it. And one thing led to another. I ended up deciding to do this. He said he'd help me, and so I was like the first. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was kind of a beta test for them to see whether or not this was duplicatable. And because I just didn't even think that failure was an option, to be brutally honest with you. I just think I was just blind to that, and I'm really thankful for it. And so anyway, so we got this thing started, and I had several mentors in my life who said, we think this is, why God made you. We think this is one of your purposes, and we're going to help you to build this thing. And so they did. And we started with 2 groups in Toledo in November of 2008. And so this was right after the recession hit. And we actually started the end of August, so it was terrible timing. But actually, it probably ended up being great timing. And so we started these groups up, and it's just been a phenomenal thing since then. And what we do in these meetings is, so we have now 6 groups going in Northwest Ohio, and so we have these, and each group meets once a month for 4 hours. And it's during business hours, and we do that on purpose because we don't want to take away from family time and all of that. And so this is really for leaders who want to grow and grow their organizations in a God-honoring way. They want to grow personally, and they want to grow spiritually. And so it's not for everybody. It's certainly not for everybody. So we have about 63 or 4 members, right now locally. And it's actually kind of interesting, Jane, you had mentioned that you love being here, and Kate too, I think you mentioned you love being here because you don't have to lead it. And so like one of our members is a guy named Dan Rogers, who's the CEO of Cherry Street Mission Ministries, and he's probably one of the most gifted leaders that I know. I mean, he's planted 7 churches, been a missionary overseas. He leads an amazing organization that is phenomenal at restoring people who are at their lowest point. And he's got a lot on his plate with this Life Revitalization Center and all this stuff. And he told his group one time, he said, this is the greatest thing I've ever done in my leadership, my Christian development, because in one of the things that I think so many of us don't value nearly enough of, he goes, you're a leader, you're leading all the time. And he goes, this is 4 hours is the only time every month that I don't have to lead. And you have no idea how valuable that is to me. And so what we do in our meetings is we have when everyone comes into a group room, so we have on average about 10 to 11 people in a group, and the groups become very close. Confidentiality is of utmost importance in the group. Everyone signs a confidentiality covenant that everything shared in the meeting stays in the meeting. If it goes outside, then that person can actually be voted out of the group. I mean, it's a very serious thing, and I'll talk a little bit more about some of that here. And so when members come into the group, I've got roundtable cards that I put out, little index cards that are have places for them to fill out their information. And what they do, I ask for that up front. They fill in what is the biggest thing that's keeping them up at night, or what's the biggest issue, the biggest challenge, the biggest opportunity, the biggest question that they want input on from the group. And so they fill those out. I collect those up front, and then we get started. We usually have a piece of curriculum at the very beginning that could be a video that everyone has watched, or it could be a case study that everyone has read and answered some questions. We just have a discussion about that. And it could be based on integrity. It could be based on anything. It could be based on personal margin in our lives. Like, what are we doing? Like your question, Jane, was about what do we do to take care of ourselves? How are we growing? How are we keeping care of our souls? How are we doing those things so that we're not getting burned out and all of that? So we had like a 3-month topic on personal margin, which was a challenge for, you think about that with most leaders. Most leaders are going like crazy and nonstop. And so taking time to actually pause and breathe is just like not even in our vocabulary usually. And so anyways, we have any number of topics, and it's almost guaranteed in every one of those discussions, everyone's going to have at least one takeaway that they can apply to their life during the time. And so that's just an amazing time. And then we transfer into roundtable time, and that's where we take these cards. And everyone has marked on the card from 1 to 10 the level of severity, like how badly do they want to talk about this. And a 10 is, man, I am up at night, or I've got to make this decision this afternoon, or whatever the case may be. And then they usually mark how much time it's going to take. And the really interesting thing about it is people will sometimes write, it's going to take 3 minutes. Well, come on. Sometimes I'll put 10 minutes. When I put 10 minutes, I know it's pretty much going to take 20 for sure. And so everyone always underestimates that big time. And so anyway, let's say Jake has an issue and he brings it up. Maybe it's something with one of his kids, or it doesn't matter whether it's business, personal, spiritual. It makes no difference, because you know what? It's all the same. So when you've got a kid issue or something like that, does that impact your leadership capability, your business, and all of that? Yeah, it absolutely does. It's not a silo where we're, doing things operating independently or anything like that from our lives. So we look at it really from a holistic perspective and have everything be a part of it. And so we are big believers in that as the leader grows, the organization will grow. As the leader is healthy, the organization will be healthy. So we spend a lot of time on self-leadership in this process. And so we do that. And so let's say if Jake's bringing up an issue, what do you think the opportunity for Kim, if she's in the group, to get something that could be helpful for her as he's getting feedback? Pretty high. Pretty high. And it's pretty amazing. And so we do that. We'll get through, so it's usually we'll spend an hour and 15 minutes during that time, and we'll get at minimum 2 issues or questions covered. Sometimes we'll cover 5 or 6 depending on how much time. So my role is really to try to, herd the cats. And we kind of saw a little bit. Jake was trying to do that today with everyone. All of us asking questions.
I thought I was doing it.
And so it's a difficult thing when you have a bunch of leaders together in a room to do that. And so that's really my role, is to try to keep things moving along, but also have the discernment to say, no, we really need to spend a little more time. And I'll share a couple of stories about some things that have happened in our groups. And so then we shift from that into the featured member presentation, and it rotates from member to member every month. And so each member, it's kind of like a State of the Union address for their life. And each member actually fills out a document that I send them a month in advance, and some don't take as much time as others, and it's very apparent when the members of the group receive this. But those that take the time to go through it say, man, just filling this out was incredibly helpful to me just in my life. I just saw some things I never had even seen before. So they go through
What was that document called?
featured member presentation. And so they fill out like what's going on in your family today that the group needs to know about. What's happening in your personal life? What, you know, how are you doing spiritually, physically? What are you doing to take care of yourself physically? What are you doing to take care of your soul? How are you doing with, you know, creating margin in your life? And, you know, all of those different things. And then they talk, there's a whole segment in there about business, like how are you doing year to date on your goals? And how are your any progress on your BHAGs? We have, so Jim Collins in the book Good to Great talked about BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals. And so in Truth at Work, we call them big, hairy, audacious, God-sized goals. And so we said, what are you doing? What are you counting on God to do that you cannot do in your own power? And so it could be someone healed of cancer, somebody, you know, whatever, you know, the case may be. And so, or I want to give away more money this year than I've ever made in my life, you know, or something like that. And it's remarkable, we actually bless you. So we actually see those BHAGs come to fruition. And so we have an annual review on all of those, which is kind of a cool thing. And so again, feature member presentation, they go through what's going on in their life, and then at the very end of the document, they share what's my one question, what's my one opportunity I'm working on, what's going on where they're getting feedback from the group. And so we like them, they send me that document a week in advance, I send it out to all the members, and they're charged with having read it, and they come, God bless you.
Bless you.
And come with questions and input for the member. And so the best presentations, when they give them, are they just do a 15-minute summary, and then we spend 45 minutes with people asking questions, giving input, and then we cover their whatever they're dealing with at the time. And again, so if you know Jane's doing hers and Corey's in there, and what are the odds of you picking up something from, you know, I mean, it's incredible how that all works. And then the last part of the meeting is our accountability section. And the reason this is so important is so Fast Company magazine did an article back in, I think, 2007, something like that, called Change or Die. And in this article, they followed around and they actually gathered, I think it was 350 people who had the symptoms of coronary heart disease. And so they all went to the same doctor, and this doctor told them all the same exact thing, said, okay, said you need to change your eating habits, your diet, and eat a diet that looks like this. And you need to start exercising in a program that looks like this. And if you don't, you are going to die really soon. So just a guess. What would you say, what percentage of that group actually made the changes knowing that if they don't, they're going to die really soon?
20%.
You said 8? It's actually 10%.
I was thinking that.
Oh my God.
That's right.
I was going to say
10%.
8, yeah.
Death is imminent if
Yeah.
they don't change, and that's what happened, right?
Yeah.
So then they took a whole other group who had the same symptoms, went to the same doctor, got the same feedback, but this time they put them in small groups. And in those groups, they encouraged one another, challenged one another, held each other accountable to doing these things. What do you think the percentage of those who actually changed in that group was?
78.
78%.
You are right on.
That's impressive. 78%. So anyway, so that we have this, even though we know change needs to be made, we don't do it because the tyranny of the urgent takes place, or whatever. I mean, we make up we're comfortable where we are. You have all these different reasons. But when you have the input from others, that can help. How many of you have ever tried to do something and all you do is say, you know what, Jake, I need to lose 5 pounds. Just the fact of stating that to somebody motivates you to get it done.
Oh, okay.
Right? So, I mean, when you just keep it to yourself, it's real easy to just kind of say, oh, no, whatever, no big deal. So anyway, so we have, I've been involved in accountability, men's groups and all that sort of stuff, and someone might say, I'm going to date my kids this week. I'm going to take one of them out for dinner and do a really nice job. And so the next Friday morning we get together and I say, well, hey, how'd it go? How'd your date with your daughter go? oh, well, you know what, our cat got sick, and it was raining, and you know, all this sort of stuff, we didn't happen. Well, you know what I usually did? Oh, come on, you can do better than that. Okay, I'm going to hold you accountable this week to that. Well, you know what, I realize that's not accountability, that's acceptability. That's, I mean, what's going on with that? So what we do in Truth at Work with accountability is everyone comes with their commitments for the month. The things that are on their round to it list. You know, Zig Ziglar talks about the thing that we need to have a little round disc with TUIT printed on it, because we all use the excuse that, well, I'm going to do that when I get around to it. Well, if you carry around to it, you can't use that excuse anymore because you always have around to it. And so the things that are on your round to it list, we want you to write down and commit to. And so you commit to the group, like I'm going to commit to, you know, pray every morning before work. I'm going to commit to, you know, read the Bible, you know, or you know, whatever the thing may be. I'm going to commit to work out 4 times a week for 30 minutes a day, or I'm going to commit to getting my employee evaluations done, or I'm going to, you know, or get my marketing plan done, or whatever. Those things that we're struggling with getting done, we mark those down, and then we ask everybody to assign a penalty or a reward. Most people are operating more from a penalty, and so most people use a financial penalty. So they'll put anywhere from, the minimum we have is like $10, but usually people are in the $50 per item range. And some do 100, some have done $1,000 if they really wanted to get done. And so then they come in next month and they report to the group how they did. And for each one they miss, they fork out money and put it in the center of the table. And I gather that, put it in a fund, and the group then votes on where to give that money. It could be a family in need, could be an organization in need, you know, anything like that. So it's a creative way to kind of put skin in the game for people and really help them. And it's amazing how many times these leaders say, I was up till 3 in the morning so I could get that dumb book read that I said I was going to get read, you know, and all of those sort of things. But it drives change in people. And so it's kind of a fun way to do that. And so that's kind of the format, and every single meeting is radically different. Even though we have the same curriculum in each group, the six, you know, 6 meetings in a month, it is radically different because everybody's bringing different stuff to the table. So there's no way to prepare for what happens. So we had one leader come to the meeting. This was a couple years ago, and they marked on their card a 3 for the roundtable issue. So not very severe in their head. And they marked down they needed 3 minutes. And so we got to the end, near the end of our time, we had 5 minutes, and that person was up on the hit parade, and so I said, okay, go ahead and share. And this person starts sharing and says, I just need some prayer because I've got people really close to me saying some really hurtful stuff. And, you know, I just don't know how to handle it. And so I just, since there was a little bit more, I started digging a little bit. A couple more members started digging a little bit more. 5 minutes later, this person is full on sobbing and says, 2 days ago I was in my garage with a loaded revolver at my temple and I have no idea why I didn't pull the trigger. And there happened to be a counselor in our group that met with this person afterwards, and then from that point on some amazing stuff has been going on in this leader's life. But where else can someone go for that? So we actually, one of the big things that we have seen with leaders is that we use the initials LIO. They're lonely, isolated, and overwhelmed. Because most leaders don't have any place to unpack the challenges of leadership with people who really get what it means to be there. And you know, what does it mean to be struggling to meet payroll? How can you get input from someone who's not been there? How can you do that? And and we find that we have many members who come from when they come for the very first meeting, and they're kind of nervous about it, and they come in, and at the end of the meeting, I usually ask them, how are you feeling? And they say, I feel like 10,000 pounds has been lifted off my back, and I feel like I'm no longer alone, even just after the first meeting. It's quite incredible. We've had members say something like, I'm this close to having an affair, I've never told this to another human being, I need you all to stop. And so we've had marriages saved, we've had just incredible stuff happen. And this guy then called me several weeks later and just was crying on the phone and said, Jimmy, he said, group saved my marriage, saved my, he had an incredibly, wildly successful business, saved my business, probably saved my life. And so it was just an absolutely incredible thing. And so a lot of people, so you asked earlier, Jane, about how Jane grew and that sort of thing. And I feel like the most blessed person on the planet to get to do what I do, because I am around these incredible, high-powered leaders. And I sometimes ask myself the question, what in the world are you doing here doing this? Because I feel like the least likely person to be in this group of leaders, right? But I get to learn. It is incredible, the stuff that I glean from these meetings. It is just remarkable about, health, personal health, not just physical, but emotional, all of that stuff, healing from past traumas and all that, business stuff, you name it. It's been truly an amazing thing. And, one of the things that I get asked a lot, and I often ponder a lot, I said, well, just as an example, we had a guy join the group, and he had a really rough personal stuff going on in his personal life. And he said, he joined the group, and he said, well, who's in the group? And I ran through the list of the members, and he goes, I don't know one of them. And I said, cool. He said, I'm going to be just a wallflower in the first meeting. I'm not going to say a word. I'm not going to tell him anything about my story, what he and I had been talking about. I said, that's fine. And I knew that probably wasn't going to be the case. And so it was literally 5 minutes into the meeting. He's full on sobbing, telling his whole story. And it was a very healing moment for him, just being able to share that. Because everyone supported him, showed him love and compassion. It was just truly an amazing thing. And the change in his life it's a night and day difference in his life today than it was then. And so it's a privilege to be able to watch that. And so why does that happen? Why does that level of vulnerability actually take place in here? And I think, there's several components to that. One, everyone knows there's a high commitment level of being in the group. Everyone's paying a fairly high price tag to be members of this group. That goes to Truth at Work. Truth at Work shares a portion of that with me, and that's how I'm funded for this portion of my work. And so one, there's a high commitment level to be involved. We actually try to talk people out of joining rather than to joining, because it takes a high commitment level to do this from a dollar perspective, and time's probably the biggest one for most leaders to take that much time out of their business. And so high commitment level around the room. There's also the confidentiality agreement that we signed, and there's also just kind of the component that everyone knows. When I present what this is about, everyone knows that people are coming in here because they want truth spoken to them. And many people don't want truth spoken to them, and we know those people. But most of the people who are coming here say, you know what, it's not fun. I know it's not fun, but I know I need it. Colin Powell says, the higher you grow in leadership, the less likely it is that people are going to tell you the truth. But the higher you grow in leadership, the more truth is your friend, and so you absolutely need it. You need to speak it. And so that's what these people are doing. So that sort of environment grows this. And I wrote down here, we mentioned earlier somebody I was talking about, Patrick Lencioni, the 5 dysfunctions of a team. And I realize that really follows along with what's happening here. So, absence of trust is the foundational one. And so there's a high level of trust in this group. And then fear of conflict. There's many of us, even in the groups, there's probably, we had a lesson about having difficult conversations with people. And probably 70% of the leaders in the room were apprehensive about having difficult conversations. 30% have no problem with it. And but it's interesting, and I fall in the category of in the 70% where I struggle with it. I've grown in it tremendously. And however, in these groups, there's no hesitation because everyone knows they're here to speak truth, and if they don't, they're actually harming the other person. And so there is that. There's not really a fear of conflict. People get in people's faces. They'll get in their face and say, I challenge you on this, and I think you really need to consider this. And so it's a high level of challenge in this environment. Lack of commitment was the third level that Lencioni talks about. And so everyone is highly committed.
they're paying a pretty significant fee to be a part of the group. They're committing their time to being a part of the group. When they sign up, it's a 12-month commitment, and then it goes month to month after that. So it's a high level of commitment. And then the fourth one's avoidance of accountability, what Lencioni talks about. And so there's a high level of accountability in the group. I mean, that's a key component to our meeting. And then inattention to results is the fifth one. And so there have been many ideas that have been birthed out of our groups that that people kind of say, hey, you had that idea. What have you done with it since, what's going on? So there's this continual focus on staying on top of the results. And so new businesses have been formed, new ministries have been formed. It's been pretty cool, some of the things that have happened. So that's it's an awesome thing that I get to do. So, yes.
Have you gender mixed groups?
Yes. So yeah, we have one group that is all men, and that's not because we wanted to do that. It's just the way it happened.
I was just wondering if that actually increased the likelihood of the vulnerability level being in separate gender.
You want to know something? No, you would think that it would.
Yeah.
I don't understand how this works. It just does. But all the other groups are mixed, and in mixed groups, we've had a guy admit to having an addiction to porn. We've had, some pretty vulnerable stuff shared in the mixed group. So I think it depends on the people involved, but so it possibly could have that, but I have found that not to be the case. We also mix nonprofits and for-profits together, and which has been a really it's been just cool, different perspectives coming together, which can be really valuable. Yeah.
Other questions?
So we all need
Comments? Really?
Yeah, it's amazing. So I have never seen anything that helps people to grow, personally, professionally, and spiritually like this at the same time. And I'm very biased about it, but I mean, as I mentioned earlier, I'm this learner and I love this stuff. And so, yeah.
So do you facilitate all of your groups?
I facilitate 5 of the local ones, and I also facilitate one via Zoom, which is like a Skype type technology for other people who do what I do around the country. There's now 25 or 26 cities that are around the country that are doing this.
Do you have like a facilitator training to train for it, or do most?
Oh, there's a training for Truth or Work overall. So yeah, I had to kind of pay to go through all of that, and it's not a franchise, but I guess you could kind of look at it a little bit like a franchise. There's no protected